So
there's no real way to do it except for as you speak, I guess. That's just the nature of the medium. But anyway, hey everybody, this is Dan. This is
Alex,
and here is an Anominy. We're my original. Okay, so I guess an introduction to this podcast. As some of you may have noticed from recent episodes of Primary Anominy, aka Anominy Questionable Movies, I have recently moved zip codes. I now have hoes in multiple area codes, as they say. And my friend Pete reached out to me when I got here. He's been doing a bunch of podcasts. You should go check him out. I'm going to leave a link to that at the bottom. He's doing like horror movie reviews mostly. But anyway, so this is a long tangent. I had this dream that we would get together a group of people that can talk about pop culture, anything, because that's really 90% of what I do with my day. I was going to say want to do with my day, but I don't think I'm like, it's the life that chose me, right? So anyway, so we're bringing in the rest of the Wu-Tang Clan here. So and so Alex is actually more OG than Anominy because we've actually done a podcast before a very long time ago. And that I believe it's still probably up and you can listen to it. It was called the Writers Without Money podcast. Some of you know I've been a co-editor / sometimes prolific contributor to writerswithoutmoney.com for a number of years. As Alex has contributed a number of pieces there too. And he's one of the people that I go to when I want to talk about movies, TV, pop culture, because he knows his shit and he knows how to talk. So we're off to a good start. So I guess now that you kind of know what we're doing, I guess let's I'll leave it to you to describe what our first project on this side project here is. This kind of like this is sort of like if Ron and I in the main podcast is sort of I don't know.
Next gen. This can be Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, that's a better one. I was trying to figure out which podcast is like Raekwon and Ghostface and which one is Method Man and Red Man.
Okay.
so anyway.
Yeah, so what we're doing here, hello everyone. We're talking about doing an episode of the show a few weeks back on something, if you listen to a lot of movie podcasts, you've probably heard of it before, Surviving Edged Weapons. And it was hilarious, but I think we said probably all there was to say about it to one another, you know. It's beers. And,
you had to be there.
Yeah. I mean, well, I will say it was an hour and a half long, and the time just flew by.
Right, and it was hilarious a few weeks ago. Depending on how the future of human history progresses, it may become more or less funny as time goes on, but I do highly recommend. I'd never heard of it. Alex just brought it up, and I guess if you want to describe Surviving Edged Weapons briefly.
Oh, yes. So Surviving Edged Weapons is a police training video. It features throughout, it'll cut to this, I think he's from Thailand, this guy who's like, a master in deflecting, attacks by whatever, you get the gist. Edged weapons in this case. And maybe him or someone else were basically, they would sell these tapes to police departments as internal training. And it's kind of, it's like part cop propaganda, like be afraid of everything at all times, like anything can be an edge. There's a shot where after they confront a suspect, a dog barks and it just freeze frames and zooms in on the dog's teeth, and it's like, how many edged weapons do you see here? And so it's part that, but also the big draw is all these vignettes that are a little too well done. of police encountering these people with edged weapons. They're like a little too well done. There's like a very weird, like specifically local accent that everyone has, like wherever they film this, like all the cops and the actors and stuff. The scene with the hookers, there's some hilarious accents on display there.
Oh yeah. And like the whole time for the first 30 minutes, I thought it was like, did you ever see the Sex Offender Shuffle?
No,
It's basically it's like the Super Bowl Shuffle, but it's all these like registered sex offenders in Florida singing about how they're sex offenders, and supposedly it was sent out as a tape to residents of this area of Florida to alert them. And it went around, and like they did a really good job making it look like that cheesy VHS 80s vibe, but it was completely fake, as it turned out. It went viral because people thought it was a real thing. This is real. This is 100% real, but it's about as ridiculous as the Sex Offender Shuffle.
Yes. And so the other thing is that these vignettes, which are slightly over the top, is a lot of them are worst case scenario vignettes where it's like a guy comes at a cop with whatever and just horrifically maims him. But with like it's from 1988, I think, and it's pretty good slasher movie type effects.
Yeah, it's like a slasher movie with no plot. I mean, some people would argue that most of those have no plot, but like this is literally just it's like if you made like remember those like NFL football follies things where it's just like guys getting horrifically injured on a football field for 60 minutes and they'd sell it on VHS. Like people bought hundreds of those. I can't go into a thrift store without seeing one of those. In the last, like, my grandmother had like 3 or 4 of them. I don't know, like people just really, I mean, I guess this was like the same time that America's Funniest Home Videos was hugely popular, right? And it's just a show where have people get kicked in the nuts and then Bob Saget goes, right? And
I mean, the ultimate distillation of which was the guy who plays Cleveland, I think, on Family Guy, doing the supposed show, You Got Kicked in the Nuts. So we watched Surviving Edged Weapons. Not much past what we just said, really, to say about it. It is a wonder to behold, but yeah, not much to say. I think they did an episode about it with on a last podcast on the left, I think it is. And that they had like 4 or 5 people on who all watched it together. So that's so they have some fun with it. But yeah, so
3's a crowd, 4's I don't know what 4 is. 5 is almost illegal in the present moment.
But yeah, so we are gathered here today to watch an anime that is a cartoon from Japan, not cartoon like Bugs Bunny, but adult cartoon. And it's fucking crazy, y'all. I mean, it's so we watched 2 episodes of that. Dan watched War Games. Recently, I have seen War Games probably a dozen times or so, a few times through, and many times in pieces on syndication growing up. So Neon Genesis Evangelion is, I think you might do a better job sort of outlining where we are at the beginning of it.
So Neon Genesis Evangelion, just to give a little bit of context, this is an anime. It was on for 2 years, and there was a movie made to wrap everything up. It's in the kind of big robot genre of Japanese entertainment, sort of like Ultraman, sort of like Voltron. You know, there's a million of these big robot shows. There was a live action Spider-Man TV show from the 70s where Spider-Man is in fact just a dude in a giant robot. That's how deep this vein of entertainment goes. Anyway, it comes on in the mid-90s. It's this huge cultural sensation in Japan. It's like what what Star Wars is to U.S. culture, Evangelion is sort of to Japanese culture. It's like that sci-fi franchise that is just inescapable. If you go to Japan, there is literally anything that you can think of that could be made into merchandise. There is Evangelion merchandise of it. There is a themed hotel you can stay in where you can literally sleep in the Evangelion room.
What?
Name it.
Dude, road
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture of it later. I'll send you the article, and then maybe we can talk about that a bit more next episode. We're both caught up with that part of it. But, there's like Evangelion Doritos, Evangelion. They kind of took the Simpsons approach with it, where they never turned down a merchandise licensing deal.
Perfume. That's a big
perfume.
That became. I don't know when I first. It was probably like 20 years ago, because I remember collector's editions of like Final Fantasy X. I remember that there was like, maybe not, it didn't come with a collector's, but you could buy, basically, it looks like a bottle of Barbasol with with that elaborate little Final Fantasy glyph logo. And that was it.
Oh yeah, and they love doing that kind of stuff. Or everybody. There's money to be made. What's love got to do with it, right?
It seems like the difference with it in Japan is they don't have this sort of misconception about what branding is. So people will be like, oh, I saw this ad and in this context, and like why would you, use that brand on that or whatever? And it's like, listen, if you can put your show's logo on a manhole cover, why the hell not?
Right.
It's all as pointless and, corrupting an influence on people's consumption of media and the world around them as it is. You're just fooling yourself thinking like, oh, that's not the right way you should advertise. Like, no.
Oh yeah, that's the craziest shit when you see people on like Star Wars forums and they're like, this is ruining the sanctity of the original trilogy, and it's like, no, like you shitting your Star Wars themed pajamas in 1980, that ruined the sanctity of everything after that.
No, the bitching, honestly, is what ruined the sanctity of it. The fact that when the bitching of the loudest parts of these very large fan bases became, front and center, especially as they pushed into the mainstream. No, that's really the part that, it's not that George Lucas made bad prequels. And let's be clear, they're very bad. But like people are not wrong about that. But like,
but the sequels I heard were not much better. I only made it 20 minutes into the episode 7. But
Force Awakens, the one that's that was the only one I saw. The one that it's like,
the one with like the orange beach ball R2-D2 thing.
Yeah, that thing I loved. I almost bought one of those RC things, actually. Yeah, like it was like a remake of A New Hope. I mean, I liked it when I saw it at the time. It was like, it was, the one thing it did have that the prequels did not was, it was a functional movie. Like it did function as like, oh, I know what I'm looking at. Whereas the prequels, especially with the weirdly static backgrounds in a lot of, like when they're on a Coruscant and, the city that's a planet or the planet that's a city and what have you.
Right.
But beyond that, like, and then the 8th one came out, I never bothered to see it. And I
heard it was bad. I heard it was really bad, but I don't.
The 8th one I heard was really bad. But then it became this whole, this whatever it was, social. I don't know what you would call it.
And then there was like Solo, a Star Wars story, which I think was about them playing beer pong. I don't pay a lot of attention to Star Wars stuff, so somebody in the audience can correct me, or maybe Alex can correct me.
But... Yes, they did Solo, a Han Solo story. I don't know what the fuck it was called, but yeah, it was a Han Solo prequel. They were sort of releasing these main entries, and then in the intervening year, they would. I mean, they only did 3 main entries so far, Disney, and the 2 intervening ones. The second one was solo. The first intervening one, which I saw, I was actually kind of excited for. I thought that'd be cool. Oh, the mission about stealing the Death Star plans. Trash. Absolute trash. Just so god-awful. The best part is when they all die at the end. Oh, and I like that the 2 characters didn't kiss at the end. Because they're like on the beach.
Because they're related?
Embracing each other, waiting to die as, literally the bomb's going off like on the beach. And
I mean, if you can't get laid in that situation, like...
Yeah, but it probably took so much convincing to tell the producers, no, you don't want to have them kiss and then get incinerated like Dan's dream in Watchmen.
Right.
Like, that's not the right way to end our Star Wars movie, Oh man, just put that in like in the Zack Snyder one with like the ultra graphic like flesh ripping off and shit. You just pop that in at the end of Rogue One. So yeah.
They should have Snyder go back to all of his old movies and then release the Snyder cut. They should have him go back to just movies that he had nothing, like, I don't know, like Schindler's List, the Snyder cut. It's like 5 hours now. And like, there's 300 people in that factory and they rise up and take down the Nazis single-handedly, right? Or something, or like, I don't know how that man's mind works, but...
Yeah, Zack Snyder, and like the stuff with like the Justice, like people with the Justice League, and the Snyder cut, and I mean, I didn't see Justice League.
I saw 30 minutes of it. It was bad.
I don't know how bad, how much difficulty Whedon could have done to it, because people were like, oh, well, it's better than Batman versus Superman. Okay, wasn't Batman versus Superman all Snyder? Because I saw that movie.
Superman, I mean, there's like...
I saw that.
I don't want to say I personally have, but I've heard about hemorrhoids that sounded more enjoyable.
I watched that movie and just spent, God, what was it, 2.5 hours? 2 hours and 50 minutes. Someone got me out of time just pinballing back and forth between utter fucking mind-numbing boredom and hysterical fits of laughter. Like, it's better than some of the better 60s Batman episodes.
Like, in terms of the cheese factor?
What's that? Oh, I mean, but they were trying to be cheesy in the 60s. Like,
right.
Like, it's just... It's one of those things, it's like you said, it has Snyder's mind, where, like, who knows, right? Like, I don't understand how someone's mind can work this way, that, A, they would even think to film these things, but then, like, go over a cut of this movie and put it out, But,
I'm just imagining, like, Zack Snyder's The Crying Game, and, like, the guy whips his dick out at the end, and Snyder's like, no, there's 30 more minutes, and then the next minute after the guy where the woman whips her dick out is just like, I'll give you something to cry about. And then just like start beating the shit out of something. I don't know. That's why he gets the big bucks, right? Because this is the best I can come up with.
Yeah, well, you hire Michael Bay for a little consulting. You end up with some real nice, some consulting on the editing, and he ends up
like
with some
depressed Michael Bay.
What's that?
Zack Snyder, he's like depressed Michael Bay, because at least like in a Michael Bay movie, you're watching, it's like, this is stupid. This is sort of like somebody grabbing you by the shoulders and shaking you for 2 hours or whatever, except for Con Air, which is the greatest movie ever made. But
Con Air, I enjoy Con Air.
Con Air is pretty great. Con Air is I can't hate on Con Air.
No, I mean,
Transformers, I could hate on that. Transformers, I could hate on, but...
Oh, yeah. I did like the first Transformers until basically after it had come out, because it was like for what it was actually kind of novel at that moment in time, because that was like 2007. And then that was immediately where everything went out of control. And it's like, well, this is clearly what started. No, I mean, not that it wasn't all going in that direction as it was with, the cacophonous CGI mess of, these property movies.
Right.
But yeah, Michael Bay. My personal Michael Bay guilty pleasure is Con Air Michael Bay.
Yes, I believe Con Air was Michael Bay.
My personal Michael Bay guilty pleasure is The Rock.
Oh yeah, The Rock is the other. By Zeus's butthole.
Which I would be remiss not to bring up in the hour of Sean Connery's passing.
Oh yeah, and I mean The Rock, the Criterion Collection agrees with you.
What's that?
The Criterion Collection agrees with you, apparently, because there's a very fancy that and Armageddon. I never quite understood why Armageddon made it into the.
Because it's funny.
Okay.
I mean, the whole thing, there are amazing, behind the scenes things with that, where, because they filmed all these, vignettes for, the DVD extras, talking to actors about this or that or whatever. Oh, what about, your experience with the movie? And, how'd you guys do this? And it's Ben Affleck talking, and, he doesn't appear to understand why he's there. He doesn't understand why Michael Bay would ask him to do so, or anyone involved. And he's like, yeah, so I we'd be talking, and I'd be like, hey, but why wouldn't it make more sense to train astronauts how to drill than to try to train oil drillers how to be astronauts? And Michael Bay would just be like, shut the fuck up or something. Right. Just no comeback whatsoever. Just shut the fuck up. Yeah.
Michael Bay is in the position he's in because you get the sense that nobody else would have that much fun whacking their action figures together. That sounded kind of dirty, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I hear you, for sure. Speaking of smashing action figures together.
We watched 2 episodes of Neon Genesis Evangelion tonight. And they were the first 2, which makes sense, right? And next week we're probably gonna watch the next 2, until we finish it.
Mercifully, that'll only take about 14 episodes. Should we do it?
Well, 14 episodes, and we should be completely through the show. Depending on how it goes, maybe we'll speed that up or slow it down, but
there's a little bragging in the middle there.
This is the pilot. This is our pilot. And so the first 2 episodes were introduced to not all of the main characters, but most of the main, or a good portion of the main characters. This show is pretty slow to introduce the main cast. I don't think Asuka shows up until episode 7 or 8. God, who's the dude with the ponytail that's Katsuragi's ex-boyfriend?
Yes, that's I forget his name, but I was talking about that earlier when I was talking about that sequence of episodes later on with him that I really like.
Oh yeah, he's a great character.
He has a great arc in this show.
We haven't met the kids at the school yet. We haven't met. Honestly, the first 2 episodes, I always kind of remembered the show having a slow start. I think it does. The first episode, it kind of plunges you into the action, but it really doesn't. Relative to what comes later, especially by TV standards, it doesn't establish a whole lot of what they're going to do later. It establishes the most basic premise of the show, which is a teenager with an estranged father who's the head of this large clandestine military organization is drafted to pilot this giant robot to fight off these giant monsters called angels. We don't really know anything about how or why we know that the robot that he's piloting is somewhat awkward in its movements. We don't really know anything about the Angels. We don't
He
really
doesn't
know.
pilot.
Huh?
Well, it's also one of those where he doesn't so much pilot it in the sense of, a Power Ranger and Megazord, but he's fused with. If you saw, what the hell was that movie? Pacific Rim. Anyone out there, if you saw Pacific Rim, the idea with, fusing the mind with the machine, and that's how it works and all that, that's sort of what's going on. And there's hints through dotted, they give you very little information, like Dan said, but they give you little, like, phrases they throw out where it's like seem kind of relevant, but you don't know the context yet. And these will become motifs, especially as time goes on, and some of them don't so much necessarily get quite a thorough explanation.
Yeah, and it's a show that rewards repeat viewing, I think. It's
Speaking of which, it's only the first time I'm watching it again. I watched it once about 5 years ago, and this is the third time you're watching it?
This is my third time, because I showed it to my now ex-girlfriend, and then I watched it on my own while smoking a lot of marijuana in about 2 days. Probably about 6 years ago, 5.5. Because I remember after I saw it, I was like, whoa, I was like blown away, because I had never seen an anime that quite hit this kind of level of depth and complication.
Yes.
Which it gets to later. The first 2 episodes don't give us a whole ton of stuff to talk about without spoilers. Although I don't know. I mean, if we're going to be covering this, well, no, we can do like a spoiler free, because I spoil enough of everything on the other podcast, I guess. But yeah, and I remember
what I was
texting you, and I was just like, "Yo, you got to watch this shit."
Yeah, I believe I had heard about it for years and years. I believe it was you telling me about it that got me to finally watch it. What I was thinking we can do actually is just if they're on it, if it's next week and we're doing episodes 3 and 4, 1 and 2 are free to spoil. You don't get to click on a podcast that says episodes 3 and 4 and not expect them to be talking about 1 and 2 and what happened.
Yeah, and so like I guess the format for this show will be, if you want to do a watch through with us, you can do that at a delay. These are going to be hosted for a while, until the internet breaks down or we run out of hosting money. And,
or you can root it into the War Boys.
Yeah. And yeah, so I guess if you want to listen to it any further and you don't want this stuff spoiled, go watch the first 2 episodes. They're short. It took about 40 minutes. You don't have to watch the opening. The opening is pretty cringy. That's the price of watching Japanese television.
Watch the opening before you watch the first episode, and watch the ending after every episode. And
the ending is awesome, and the ending they're kind of like teasing you about later in the series. There's a lot of like covert spoilers in the first 2 episodes, and it's a little bit hard for me to talk about it right now, just because that was a lot of what I was noticing. Was like, you have that sense, kind of like the other show, it's nothing like Arrested Development, except in this one very specific sense. But you have this kind of, the world has been fully established in the minds of the writers, creators, etc. So they feel very comfortable with giving you partial information, because they know that they're not going to contradict it later. So you're seeing a lot of things you're sort of thrown in the middle of the action in a way that you can't be in a narrative that develops more over time.
Well, so I haven't been able to push the issue really, because this is in theory the trade-off of what you have to watch, because I watched Evangelion because of you those years back. Another show very much like that, Babylon 5.
I do need to watch. This might be the time in my life to watch Babylon 5. I'm like looking for a show to watch, because I I am making my way slowly through all of Homicide: Life on the Street. That is
Okay.
very good, but it's very dense. I just scored a copy of Northern Exposure. I do want to watch all of that at some point.
Is Homicide the one with Andre Braugher?
Yep.
Okay. And
yep.
that's like
Danny Baldwin, my favorite Baldwin.
that's like Commando era Andre Braugher, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's like very early 90s. So that Homicide: Life on the Street went on the air in 1991, I believe.
Okay.
And it was, and then NYPD Blue came out in 1992. They're superficially similar shows. I think that Homicide: Life on the Street.
That's the Coca-Cola.
They're both, Homicide: Life on the Street is better. I think they're both very good shows, and they both launched so you got like the HBO Holy Trinity of the early 2000s, right? And the major TV work that the three creators of those shows, for those who don't know what I'm talking about The Wire, Sopranos, and Deadwood. The guy who created Deadwood was the co-creator of NYPD Blue. The guy who created The Wire was the co-creator of Homicide: Life on the Street. And the guy who created The Sopranos, I don't think he co-created Northern Exposure, but he wrote a lot of episodes on it and ended up being the showrunner towards the end.
Yeah, those shows are kind of where that those guys had all worked on already, or kind of where that ship of hour-long procedural television starts to sail toward what became prestige TV as we think of it.
Yeah, because you sort of like the very earliest examples of something like prestige TV would probably be like a lot of the development of U.S. television revolves around police shows for whatever reason. And Hill Street Blues is kind of the first one of those hour-long, like it's not quite a drama, it's not quite a comedy. It's out there, you got a huge ensemble cast, and that was actually where David Milch, the guy who did Deadwood and co-created NYPD Blue, that's where he started out as a writer.
Wow.
Well, he actually started out as a literature professor at Yale, but then somehow he ended up writing for Hill Street Blues. And yeah, I think Homicide: Life on the Street is honestly better than The Wire so far. The first season episode, Three Men and Adina Watson, if I was teaching a class on television, I would probably screen that as part of the curriculum.
Okay.
It's probably the best bottle episode I've ever seen.
Sounds like something worth checking out then.
Very worth checking out.
Been a very long time since I saw even a bit of Homicide.
Yeah, they don't show it on TV that much. You can't stream it anywhere, and the DVDs are they're expensive. The price never went down because not a lot of people bought them.
Okay.
But it's well worth checking out. Yeah, but so to go back to Evangelion, we're introduced to NERV, which is the big secretive military organization that controls and/or potentially has created these giant robot things called Evangelions, hence the name of the show.
Don't worry about that Neon Genesis nonsense.
Yeah, the Neon Genesis thing, there's a lot of like Christian iconography in the show, which is really, we were talking about this as we were watching it, but it's sort of the way that certain TV shows in the West have appropriated Eastern culture. This is sort of the inverse of that. Like, you're seeing a lot of crosses used because they look cool. I mean, there's some thematic significance here.
Right.
But it's definitely, I mean, I think there's more thematic significance than there is in, say, like something like I don't know. I was watching Legend of Korra as like that. I was watching some of that, the like Avatar: The Last Airbender sequel show.
Oh, okay.
because my now ex wanted to rewatch it. I was not that impressed. I know a lot of people swear by that show.
I've heard Avatar is great, but
I've heard both of them were great. Maybe I should watch the first one first. That might make sense.
What was Avatar? That was like Nickelodeon basically made an anime or something?
It's like a fake anime, yeah. So Nickelodeon, they commissioned these two guys who were like, I think they were RISD graduates, something like that. And they basically came up with this show where it's like a lot of stuff from Chinese culture put in a blender. And then you have, out comes this show that does not look like much else that's on Nickelodeon.
Yes.
Gets away from that kind of UPA animation style that they were heavily dependent on for a very long time. When I say UPA, I'm talking about like the Fairly Odd Parents style, where you got the big, chunky, very exaggerated figures.
Oh, okay. Dexter's Lab.
Yeah, like anything that kind of followed after those Gendy Tartakovsky shows in the 90s.
Yeah, Powerpuff Girls. Yeah,
Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack. Well, that was 2000s, but that was later.
This is a complete aside. I have not seen it. Have you seen Primal at all?
No.
That one.
Show?
That's it's the new Gendy Tartakovsky show. I may be mistaken. I believe there is no dialogue.
Okay, I mean, like the early parts of Samurai Jack, there's like no or barely any dialogue.
Does he ever have any dialogue on that show?
Yes.
Okay.
There's like very brief moments of dialogue on that show, I believe, but there's like long silent sequences in that.
Oh yeah, for sure. But Primal is Gendy Tartakovsky, and it's like caveman type, but there are dinosaurs and shit, that kind of thing. So I guess there's your justification if there's truly no dialogue in it. Samurai Jack, I once watched the first 3 episodes of it a few years back. Absolutely mind-blowing, incredible. Shit happened, never got back to it.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the major figures in U.S. animation from the last 30 years or so, because, like, there's the stuff he made, which was a huge part of defining what Cartoon Network was, and Nickelodeon to a large extent for many years afterwards. And then there's just all these other shows that are kind of taking that house style. And that was like everywhere. Like they even did that Spider-Man cartoon where the animation style was like a lot closer to that kind of style than to say the like Ditko Romita kind of Spider-Man drawing, a Spectacular Spider-Man.
Okay. See, my exit, I was around the exact right age where like Fairly Odd Parents was something I, watched from the beginning and continued to enjoy into adulthood. But like I was at whatever the exact right age to balk at SpongeBob when it came out and be like, oh, whatever, that looks like some stupid kid's show, whatever.
SpongeBob, I loved early SpongeBob.
Oh yeah, no, fabulous. Yeah, I wish I had known, but it was just so out there. My favorite thing from SpongeBob is when they go to the beach. There's a beach on the floor of the ocean.
Right. God, my favorite SpongeBob moment, I think, so my friend and I, we stayed up 24 hours once to try to watch, or he stayed up 24 hours. I passed out after a certain point. We tried to watch an entire 24-hour SpongeBob marathon on Nickelodeon once, and it got to, I was like half asleep, so I don't remember a lot of the rest of the episode, but it's like Mrs. Pufferfish, the driving instructor, she makes SpongeBob the hall monitor, and he just gets drunk on power, and he's like screaming at everybody, and he's like, crime and punishment and crime in the hall, and that was just my favorite.
Yeah. punishment and crime.
In the hall. And yeah, like SpongeBob, when you see it as like everybody that was left from Ren and Stimpy and Rocko's Modern Life teaming up with Tom Kenny from Mr. Show, like it makes a lot more sense why it's screwed up. Because like SpongeBob, you think about it, it's a sponge in a bikini bottom. You got the slang word for an asshole. And then their best friend is Sandy. Like, if there's sand in your bikini bottom, and Mr. Krabs, there's crabs in your bikini bottom. I'm not the first person to point this out, but there's...
I knew all the dirty shit in Rocko's Modern Life.
Right.
I know about that.
The Choky Chicken restaurant.
Yeah, the Choky Chicken. That one... I have to believe that, you know, everyone, what do they call it? Standards and practices? The department who looks at, you know, who censors the shows. I have to believe every single person who reviewed that was like, maybe we'll try to slide this by. Just like all the way to the top like that.
Well, I feel like because it was on at the same time as Ren and Stimpy, they were probably spending so much time on Ren and Stimpy, they were just like, you know what, whatever.
I mean, Nickelodeon was definitely... They were taking chances in, you know, sort of an aggressive way that you didn't really see in children's television.
Oh, yeah, early 90s Nickelodeon, and, like, even the live-action stuff, like, Adventures of Pete and Pete is probably the strangest piece of live-action children's television ever
The
made.
Adventures of Pete and Pete, to me, can be summed up in the scene where the younger Pete has had his gut removed at the hospital, and he has his gut in a stall in the boys' room, and is charging, I think he's charging admission, maybe he's just showing it off, he's charging admission, and all you get is you'll see the shot of the door opening from the inside of the stall, and him and the other kids looking in with this green glow projected onto their face from his gut. There's the episode with the bus, and that in the episode.
Oh yeah, where they're all... Any episode with Bus Driver Stu is like instant classic in my book.
The episode
like DOS Bus, Yellow Fever.
Which one is the red light episode?
Oh, that's actually the last episode of the series, if I'm remembering correctly, where he's just stuck at the red light for the entire episode.
Yes. That's the last episode, really.
I think that was the last episode. Yeah, it's called Snow Day. Or no, it's not called Snow Day. Snow Day is the movie that the creators of Pete and Pete made after Pete and Pete ended that's terrible.
I would watch that movie like crazy when I was younger, and it was on Showtime, and you know why I would.
Because it was on TV?
No, because it has, I forget the girl's name. But...
Oh, the girl, yeah. I remember thinking she was like pretty cute when I was like 7.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you wouldn't have been 7. That movie was, I want to say, 2002.
That was 2002?
Yeah.
I was 12 when that came out? I could have sworn that was late 90s. Wait, I'm going to look this up. There's no way that was 2002.
I'm telling you.
It's kind of weird. Those guys, like, after Pete and Pete, never really did much of...
You were 1 year off. I was 2 years off. It was 2000.
2000. Okay, so that's like right at the... Yeah, because I feel like when I was 12, I probably wouldn't have been going to see something because it had the Nickelodeon name on it.
Right.
Because I was that cool. No, it's just, you know.
What was the first one? It was Harriet the Spy?
Yeah, I remember when that came out. I saw that at a like dinner movie theater place that no longer exists called Broadway Joe's. That was the only movie I ever saw there. They had nice, like, you know, they had these round tables to watch the movie. They had them like on a... It was a fun movie. You know, I don't remember it being anything that great. I feel like, so what I heard on the internet, so take this with an enormous grain of salt, is that Snow Day was supposed to be the Pete and Pete movie initially.
It had to have been so much weirder and contextual as originally conceived. I mean,
Yeah, like there's
the-
stuff in there that I remember where it's like this totally would fit in a Pete and Pete movie. Like it's a snow day, they build this like snow fort that's literally like a house. That's totally a Pete and Pete moment.
yeah,
Um,
and it does feel like something's missing.
hmm.
That's a bit. It's one of those movies that's kind of like everything that should be there is there, but it feels oddly like it's without a soul. You know, it doesn't pass the
Yeah.
umph test. You know.
Yeah, like Pete and Pete was kind of lightning in a bottle. Like I don't know if you could make a proper follow up to Pete and Pete.
Well, it's the exact right time. Like when we were watching Survived Edged Weapons, we also watched a bunch of MTV Liquid that night.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Liquid
right.
TV, yeah.
And there was a huge burgeoning market at that time for
TV, yeah.
Yeah, for anything. Well, just I think because for so long, people had what, 3, then 5, then 7 stations.
Right, that was the first time people had like an extended cable. Although, I mean, people did have extended cable packages before then, because Nickelodeon, they started broadcasting in like 1979.
Oh, yes, I think I do know that.
Yeah, because like the initial shows were like, you can't do that on television. And there was a lot of like foreign animation showcases where they just like get licenses for all these short foreign films.
Okay.
And they, like that you could theoretically show to kids. But they didn't really hit their stride till the early 90s when they started hiring these people who probably would have ended up being underground cartoonists otherwise. Like I feel like there's a really heavy underground comics vibe to both Ren and Stimpy, obviously, Rocko's Modern Life, totally. Doug, not so much. Doug was just there for the ride. I mean, I don't remember it being bad. I remember enjoying Doug, but Doug did not leave anywhere near the kind of impression that Ren and Stimpy, Rocko's Modern Life, and P&P. And there were a few other weird live action shows in that period too. There was and also the game shows were really weird at that point. There was Salute Your Shorts was the other big live action one they did.
I watched Salute Your Shorts. I've probably seen every episode of that a few times over.
Probably me too.
The one I loved
the Hidden
was
Temple.
Kids Gone Crazy or something. The one where they just
Wild and Crazy Kids or something.
Yeah, which like a few years later when they did the videos where they got improper releases from drunken women, Girls Gone Wild.
Right.
Ever since Girls Gone Wild, Wild and Crazy Kids sounds profane to me.
Right.
But then it turns out it's like, well, what was it? It was like tug rope competitions, but they throw in, some wacky parameter to it.
Right, and they assemble this great team of creatives. They slowly lose some of them because, like, John K.
You can only pay so many people.
That too, but like you heard all that stuff that came out about John K., right? The Ren and Stimpy guy. Yeah, and like that wasn't why they fired him. They fired him because he was missing deadlines left and right. And that was honestly, out of all the Me Too moments, I was sort of like, wow, the guy who created Ren and Stimpy's kind of creepy. I am so shocked, right? Like it would take a certain kind of person to make that show.
well, I mean, the one that was really sort of, I guess, gross because of his prolificness. I don't know if that's a word.
Lack of prolificacity. That's not a word.
Dan something, one of the creators over at Nickelodeon, who got Me Too.
No, Steven Hillenburg's the SpongeBob guy. Dan.
Schneider?
Oh yeah, but that was later. Dan, what's his face? The guy who created like iCarly and all that stuff.
Oh, is that what he did?
He was, so there was a lot of stuff that came out about him being kind of like very creepy around the talent, and then they just sort of unceremoniously fired him.
I could wager a guess why then.
Yeah, I mean, and there's stuff that came out. There's like a good YouTube channel called Blame It on Jorge that has a really long episode about that. I didn't really care because that was all stuff that was on after I'd stopped watching Nickelodeon regularly.
Hey, I just came up with a name for this first episode of our cast here. Blame It on Shinji.
I was going to call it Wild and Crazy 30-something-year-old Men.
Wild, crazy, drunken 30-year-old government agents for living with a 12-year-old boy.
Right. And you know, and to go back to Evangelion, because that's, in theory, that's what we're talking about. This is not considered, like, there's some pretty, like, extreme violence in these early episodes. We see, like, a spear literally go through the robot's head and blood comes spurting out. There's
like
a lot of, like,
Tarantino
shots. And this is not, I don't think people were showing this to very small children, but this was not technically a show that was specifically meant for adults.
Which is crazy. Like,
right.
Well, I mean, if children in Japan could parse this show to any degree, then we got to borrow something from the education system, because it's a very convoluted show.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, if there's anything that Avatar and Legend of Korra really get right about, like, appropriating anime, and, you know, I'm kind of, I don't know, I have to watch it all the way through before I start. The Legend of Korra stuff that I saw, it was definitely a cut above what I would have been expecting out of Nickelodeon at that point, but I wasn't that impressed. The whole, like, obsession with child soldiers and society's pressure to do things that children do not want to do, which of course is, like, a huge element in anime.
Yes.
Massive element in anime. That's present, and that would have been a lot more relatable, I think, to Japanese children than to U.S. audiences.
Okay.
Because I feel like U.S. audiences, I can't think of a lot of, like, the closest thing you get to, like, a child soldier show or property in U.S. TV and kids pop entertainment is, like, Spider-Man, but he brings that on himself. It's not like his dad's like, you have to become Spider-Man or else I will not love you, you know, right? And it's not like I think that's, like, the two major differences between U.S. and Japanese, like, sci-fi fantasy type entertainment, is that the U.S. were obsessed with secret identities. I can't think of an anime where there's, like, a person who has a secret identity.
Death Note.
Oh yeah, because Death Note is basically just Death Note. I got to check the dates on it, but Death Note reminded me a lot of the Dan Close Death Ray comic.
Okay.
Which is, like, much shorter than Death Note, but it's sort of like Dan Close, who's the guy who did Ghost World and Velvet Glove, Cast and Iron, and a few other things.
Oh, okay.
It's his take on a superhero comic. This kid finds a literal death ray where he can point it at somebody and they just cease to exist. He ends up in this weird Leopold and Leb relationship with his friend. And like every Daniel Close, well, not every Daniel Close comic, but a lot of Daniel Close comics, as they grow out of adolescence, they grow apart, but then the one guy is just sort of living with these weird psychological issues he's gotten because of the fact that he, like, wished people out of existence successfully when he was 14.
A random aside, a comic you should read, Ex Machina, which
the Vertigo comic.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's almost like a neoliberal comic book. Like I understand they all are functionally, but it's like a neoliberal comic that thinks it's smarter than sort of, that thinks it's thinking outside of the political box. And then, but in reality, the whole thing is constraint, and or I shouldn't say it's a neoliberal comic. I should say it believes those things, but accidentally ends in a fashion that sort of shows, no, you're pushed as deeply into the box as you can be. And it just misses its own point entirely at the very end. But it's,
does it have kind of like the Casablanca problem where, like, Humphrey Bogart tells us at the end, like, everything that's important is you getting on that plane with Victor, you're the part of his work or you're part of his work, etc. But then the previous almost 2 hours only exists to convince us the opposite. It's just sort of like a pointless night in a hotel room with Humphrey Bogart. You could rename the movie that.
I think, well, so it's a very good comic in that it has a very novel, I don't know what they call it, but the guy, he becomes a technopath, I believe is what they call it. He gets blown up by some possibly alien thing, that's attached to the Brooklyn Bridge. He is like a maintenance worker or whatever. And after this, he can talk to machines. Not, he can't talk to a computer, but he can talk to simple machines. He can turn a radio on and ask things questions, like they have their own personalities. It's a little like...
Well, it's like he bought a dot.
Well, it's a little like a tech... sort of, if you wanted to do, the walking clock and candlestick, but, you wanted to give it technobabble and a reason why...
Beauty and the Beast?
Yes. Which, who are they? They were the Beast servants who got transformed?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because they get transformed back at the end of... Why do I remember that? I haven't seen that movie since I was 5. I granted, those Disney movies when you're a kid, like, just by virtue of being a kid and being in proximity to other kids, I've probably seen most of those Disney movies at least 5 times.
I remember going over to my cousin's house, and they had a VHS of The Lion King. It's like, hey, you want to watch The Lion King? I was like, yeah, I saw The Lion King. I like that. I'm a kid. They knew every fucking word of the movie and recited it as 2 hours. Like a 2-hour movie. Or maybe an hour and a half. I don't know. But...
You get to that point. Do you ever see that video with the guy, I forget what magazine he worked for, but like the people in his office, like he was telling the people in his office, I can recite the entire movie Mean Girls. And they were like, bullshit. And then it's a 30-minute video. He's just doing it like speed reading. He's not like intoning anything. He's just like every piece of dialogue exactly in Mean Girls off the top of his head in 30 minutes. It's kind of mesmerizing.
I mean, there was a time where I would be bored in elementary school, and just during class, I would just start, like, thinking about a South Park episode line by line from beginning to end, and kind of, like, almost watching it. Like...
I feel like there's certain Simpsons episodes I could probably get close to doing that with at this point.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you wanted to create a truly insufferably millennial episode of the podcast, I know a guy. And between you, me, and him, we might create the black hole that destroys this terrible culture as we know it. So maybe we should try it. We'll draw the pentagram in the circle, do the seance, get the candles going, get the weeds.
Oh yeah, like I realized, and it's weird because that's sort of your foundational text, right? Because like I wasn't really with the Bible or anything, right? So like I get out of this long-term relationship, like very long-term, and I move into this new place, and the first thing I think in my head is, I'm not sleeping in a bed with my beautiful wife, but I'm also not sleeping in a race car. That was how I framed it in my head. Immediately, that was my instinct. That's the glass half full, half empty for somebody who grew up with The Simpsons.
Yeah, And I mean, you transitioned well. You didn't need to borrow a feeling or anything. Didn't get your car stolen.
Borrow a feeling. I mean, I haven't, we haven't spoken, so she could be dating Nitro from American Gladiator at this point, but,
my favorite thing, and it
it's
resonates.
dignity! It's dignity!
It resonates so much from when my own parents got divorced. Is the scene where Luann is just like happily like folding things up and putting them carefully in a box. She closes the box, writes Kurt on it, and then pours some lighter fluid and sets it up.
That might be the best TV episode about a divorce that I've ever seen.
The dignity scene is one of, in my opinion,
Beautiful.
the most legendary comedic scenes of all time. Just so... so just masters of the sight gag, or in that case, a non-sight gag.
Right.
But so
right.
yeah,
and then when he finds the Allied biscuit tin, it's like, you've been buying the other biscuit. He doesn't say that. I forget the exact line, but
no, he says she says how under him the cracker factories fall into a tie with table time and Allied biscuit. Or and of Allied biscuit. I guess this is the part where the acid kicks in. Oh yeah. But so to make a complete 180 from where we are, so Evangelion, very interesting thing about. So yeah, there are these gyro. Dan gave the summary earlier, but the really interesting thing is, and it's front and center from the first scene of this show, with the main character Shinji is waiting for a train, or I think he's just gotten off a train or something.
Yeah, it's a very Ozu type shot. Like Ozu, who's like the one of the masters of Japanese cinema long before anime existed. His favorite poetic metaphor is a train station. So you'll have all these establishing shots of the outside of train stations, trains coming and going. That's all I got.
And but to that point, that's one of my favorite shots in live in motion film composition is when Shinji is looking sort of down the city, because it's sort of grades downward for a very long ways, and there's there's a landscape behind it, and it's a beautifully shot show. And actually, we were pointing it out as we were watching, and I really didn't notice. I noticed, because it's hard not to with most anime the first time through. I noticed a little, but there's an incredible economy as far as, like I said, there was that one scene where it was going for about 15, 20 seconds, and I remarked, like, this scene has had 2 shots in it. Where 2 shots, nothing moving, and it works. It's very economical with what they were able to draw and get out and whatever with their budget, and a lot of as you said with the Ozu type shots, a lot of that is it works really well in utilizing that kind of thing. A long landscape shot to just. Because you kind of need to pad things out, but, you start zoomed in on it and pull back a little. So it looks like, there's more going on in frame than there is.
Yeah, it's almost like the lack of budget forced, although I don't want to say it forced them, because I've watched a lot of low-budget anime that it does not achieve or accomplish this at all, but...
Oh, no.
Yeah, like Hideaki Anno, who is the creator mastermind behind this show, he almost stumbles accidentally into like Ozu Bresson territory because he can't show things and needs to do so much with the audio or implications.
Yes, I think this might not be as good of a show if they had the budget they would have liked.
Well, we know it wouldn't have been because they got the budget and it sucked.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we haven't decided if we're going to talk about those. But yes, so some years after Evangelion, they started not remaking, but they did like a reimagining, I guess you would call it. Sort of the Battlestar Galactica to the 1976 Battlestar Galactica. And
well, it's like an auto remake though, because it's the same guy remaking his own text. So it's almost like it's like Hitchcock doing Man Who Knew Too Much twice, or actually probably the most prolific maker of auto remakes in the cinema is Ozu. He would remake the same movie 3 or 4 times, sometimes with slight differences that just sort of reflected his mood. Because like Late Spring, An Autumn Afternoon, almost not the same movie, but the plot is almost identical. There's at least 3 or 4 of those movies where it's like a grown woman is living with her aging father. She has to marry somebody and leave the house, and that's the whole movie. And he probably went back to that. I mean, those are the 2 I'm thinking of, but the guy made at least 50 movies, so there's probably other examples in there.
It's also a lot more common, it seemed like, in the silent movie era, and not long. It seems like it continues into the talkie. Like, I feel like when Hitchcock did his Man Who Knows Too Much, or Man Who Knew Too Much, like, I feel like that probably wasn't seen as particularly unusual at the time. Whereas now it'd be like, oh, that's weird. A guy is like making his own movie again, and the first movie had a perfectly,
Yeah, the only recent example I can think of besides the Evangelion, they call them the rebuilds. That's like the marketing term they use.
Yes.
Is Michael Haneke remaking Funny Games in English almost exactly.
Okay. Yeah, there have been a few movies like that where they've remade them in another language and it's almost the same movie. And then a lot of movies where they haven't. The Departed is a good example.
Well, and the Departed, though, is a different director. That's like
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I got off the track there,
Yeah, there's been a lot of, like, English language reimaginings of, like, Hong Kong action movies and a lot of different
Hong Kong action movies are so much better.
Oh, my God, yeah. I mean, The Departed, I feel like, I don't know. It's not a great movie. It's like, it's decent. It's entertaining. It goes by very quickly. Vera Farmiga, why not?
Yeah, she's good. I don't know.
Did I ever get to see like 70-year-old Jack Nicholson snorting coke off somebody's ass? No, I did. I didn't need to, but. He managed to get Marky Mark to be tolerable, so that's a thing.
Yeah. I think Mark Wahlberg can be acceptable, yes, at times. He was good in that. Man, Jack Nicholson walked onto that set, and he just found the biggest piece of scenery, unhinged his jaw, and just clamped down for the next 90 shooting days.
Oh, yeah, Nicholson is like in my eyes, Jack Nicholson's one of the most overrated actors of all time.
Oh my God, yes.
He has one mode.
Yes.
It's not that, and it's not like Nicolas Cage sort of has one mode, but it's such a bizarre mode that I can watch it indefinitely, and he's doing a lot of. Nicolas Cage has a larger point to make, right? Nicolas Cage is basically saying fuck you to realism in acting, and that has been the project of his career, and that's like a pretty deep statement to make, and you watch interviews with him, he knows exactly what he's doing.
Really?
He's self-aware about it. Yeah, there's this great one where he just goes through a bunch of roles on YouTube. And you can kind of see that because, like, his stage name, right? Because his actual last name is Coppola. He chose Cage as a reference to John Cage, the experimental composer, the 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence guy. But yeah, Nicholson is just sort of, he's there. He's got a good grin.
Well, he's from that sort of that group of actors from that Mean Streets era, where the movies were getting, the streets were getting meaner, if you will. The movies were getting grittier. They were exploring. This is when they started showing X-rated movies in mainstream cinemas. And
And
so
you have like the second generation of method actors, where they're sort of like, you have the lazy method actors.
yeah, so that's exactly what I'm going at. So it's Robert De Niro, who's not all the way there, but a guy whose main thing is like, if I am really good at being extremely explosively angry when it's called for, that's good acting. And so it's like him, Al Pacino to a lesser extent, and then Jack's the King.
Mm.
And Dustin Hoffman so many times came so close to that.
Oh, yeah.
Always just like leans back from that ledge. But he gets
it's
so
sort of like,
perilously close.
because I watched Rebel Without a Cause again like a year ago, and I mean that's a great movie. But I always kind of thought like, okay, what they're trying to do in these roles, they're trying to do the Marlon Brando and Streetcar Named Desire thing, or the James Dean and Rebel Without a Cause thing, right?
Yeah,
because that was
and
like the
but
public.
Those characters are that way for a reason in those stories.
Right, and when you watch James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, it's one of the best acting performances maybe in all of U.S. cinema. And there's so many little nuances. He's not just being moody and blowing up for no reason every once in a while.
Right.
Brando could definitely do that sometimes, although younger Brando was less prone to that.
And I hope you'll forgive the me saying this about your podcast, but I trust that I'm not giving any bad ideas to people with the power to do things with them. But to talk about the nuance of James Dean and Rebel Without a Cause, if Hollywood tried to remake that movie today, it would be Robert Pattinson. You know, and so like they would totally miss the mark, not understand it at all. And yeah, he'd be like a, gloomy, like obnoxious, depressed teenager.
Yeah, I think the only good, because there have been like a million different movies ostensibly aimed at teenagers where you have like at least one of the characters is supposed to basically just be this riff on James Dean and Rebel Without a Cause.
Right.
Twin Peaks, the guy on the motorcycle.
Fonzie, the Fonz.
Oh, and yeah, the Fonz in Twin Peaks, yeah.
No, I'm
on Happy Days, yeah. He's a riff on that. Although he's supposed to be like jokey. The only one that I think manages to bring something truly new to the discussion is Christian Slater and Heathers.
I have not seen Heathers.
You've never seen Heather? Oh my God.
No, I love the premise. It's been on my list for 15 years because of it. But that movie was on my Netflix queue back when you needed to launch Netflix on your PS3 by putting a Netflix disc in the console, which I still have just for the novelty of it.
It's history.
Yeah, there you go.
Valuable history.
So Christian Slater. So what do you think the Letterman appearance is? Do you think that was intentional, or
are you talking about Crispin Glover?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm talking about Crispin Glover. Never mind.
Which we are actually planning an episode of the podcast where we're going to have Matt Cornell on again. We're going to talk about a few Crispin Glover movies.
But, Christian Slater, it's like he was doing a Jack Nicholson impression. Like that was his shtick, it seemed like.
But I feel like Christian Slater's Jack Nicholson impression, for me at least, was always more interesting than actually watching Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Because especially in Heathers, and I don't want to give away too much of Heathers because you haven't seen it, he's sort of going into why the charisma of the Jack Nicholson type is, why there's something kind of off about it.
Okay.
Because to me, the weird thing about Jack Nicholson is that he's all charisma with, there's no sign of depth. I think he could have played a very good psychopath.
So I was going to say a moment ago, actually, that with Jack Nicholson, all you need to see of him, and everything about how Jack Nicholson acts, is his best role, which is The Shining, which is where he gets to play a psychopath, and the whole thing is being increasingly...
Oh, wait, yeah, I forgot The Shining exists. Yeah, wait, he could have played a great...
Yeah. Oh, The Shining, man, I can watch that movie at any time. That's one of those movies where it's like, I might be able to do that line by line. I might miss a scene.
Right, and then him like spontaneously blowing up in that movie, that works perfectly. That's like a thing that needs to be in that movie.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think, Five Easy Pieces. I hate Five Easy Pieces. I mean, he's not in much of Easy Rider. Easy Rider is maybe the most overrated movie that was ever made.
Well, I think I haven't seen it, but I think sort of that off the energy that there's something off about that you were talking about in Heathers that you think Christian Slater was trying to get at. It's I think the character, the archetype is Jack Nicholson as he appears in Easy Rider. I think what imprinted onto the culture and what probably early is it's Jack Nicholson as he appeared in Easy Rider, but as he behaves in Five Easy Pieces.
Right. Yeah, Five Easy Pieces is one of the defining, like, I'm gonna do method acting by blowing up in one scene movies.
Yeah.
Like everything in that movie is about him like having this like, I was great at playing the piano, fuck you for being a waitress scene, right?
Is that the one with him smashing the grapefruit into her face at some point?
I think so, yeah. It's been a really long time since I saw it.
I remember nothing. I saw that movie for sure at some point, and yeah, it's like, it's like Alice doesn't live here anymore. Like,
I never saw Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Yeah, it's like there are boxcars. There's a lot of writing in boxcars. Lord knows if I could tell you what the fuck it's about.
Yeah. Yeah, did you ever see the first Scorsese movie? Who's That Knocking on My Door with Harvey Keitel?
No, I didn't. So back in that Netflix day, I was doing a Scorsese run where I was getting every Scorsese movie, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get Who's That Knocking at My Door, so I started with Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Yeah, that is such a weird, it's like his attempt to make a John Cassavetes movie. So it's just like a man and a woman arguing in black and white for most of it, but then there's this like shot there's a sequence that's clearly, I don't want to say it's him ripping off Easy Rider with the like rapid cut montage thing, because Easy Rider is ripping off Kenneth Anger with that. And I'm pretty sure Martin Scorsese would have known who Kenneth Anger was. Yeah, there's a few, it's like weird. It's like a Cassavetes movie. It's like Cassavetes light. It plays a little weirdly now. I guess it's because it's just like Harvey Keitel and this woman are dating. She mentions that she isn't a virgin. And then he just flips shit for the rest of the movie, which apparently was, now that doesn't play so great. I guess maybe in 1968 that was more common.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you do have to look at it in the context.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of like, remember there's kind of like, not art films, but sort of artsy kind of independent films from, the early to late 60s where it'll just be like two people talking. It's like, it's set up like a stage play almost.
Yeah.
Talking, kind of intermediate shot. There's a table, there's a couple chairs, maybe there's a couple cups, and like an ashtray, because of course they're going to be smoking. But it's just black. Like, it's like the whole, like, there's a spotlight on the scene. It's like the way, they've been filming police interrogation scenes for the last 40 years. It sounds kind of like that, but
it's sort of like that. There's a little bit more camera movement. The indoor scenes, he's clearly lifting a lot from like the man-woman arguments in Godard's Breathless, if you ever saw that. Not my absolute favorite Godard movie, but it's one of those movies that was a movie that got a completely unnecessary remake in English with Richard Gere.
What was it called?
Breathless.
Oh, no, completely.
1983. It was a long time ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't.
It was like a few years after, because I think the first movie he was in was Looking for Mr. Goodbar. So that would have been like 3-4 years after that, maybe.
You mentioned age, offhanded thing that occurs to me. When I was growing up, they'd show it a lot on TV. I loved that movie where he's the cop who wins the lottery.
I don't think I ever saw that one. What is that?
I remember. It Could Happen to You.
Okay.
He's a cop. He wins the lottery. He doesn't have cash on him at like lunch one day or whatever. So he stiffs the waitress and says, "Hey, if I win the lottery, I'll give you half of it." And then like he actually does, and it's loosely based on something that actually happened, I guess.
So like somebody actually went to a diner and didn't pay once.
Well, no, he didn't leave a tip. because he didn't have
Oh.
cash or whatever, and promised like, hey, I just bought this ticket. If it comes in, I'll give you half. And she's like, okay, see you again, never, right? And then he wins. He's married. Is it Meg Ryan that's the waitress? I don't know, but it's Nicolas
If
Cage.
it's the early 90s, it's got to be Meg Ryan.
Yeah. It's 94. So very likely. And terrible. I'm blanking on her name. Spike Lee's girlfriend in Do the Right Thing. Rosie Perez.
Oh yeah.
Rosie Perez plays his wife, who is obviously not pleased to learn that he's, going to give half his lottery to some, and, a whole legal battle ensues, and, they start falling for one another, blah, blah. When you're 9, it's like cute pablum.
Right. I mean, Meg Ryan is like, so my mother was like, she would get into these depressive episodes when I was like younger, where she would just TiVo every movie that got 2.5 stars in the TV guide. She realized anything more than that she didn't like, anything less than that she didn't like, but whoever was writing the TV guide reviews, when they said 2.5 stars, that was a mom movie.
Those aren't reviews, though. They would just give it a rating. There wasn't a review.
Oh, maybe I'm not thinking about the TV guide, the magazine. I'm thinking about like when you're going through the like clicker guide and you hit info and it gives you a certain number of stars. Like kind of Leonard Maltin style, you get like a half sentence review and then X number of stars. And so she ended up watching You've Got Mail probably, I want to say at least 15 times. And so Meg Ryan, Meg Ryan was a constant presence in the house when I was younger, because she was just watching You've Got. Whatever happened to Meg Ryan? I haven't heard about her in years.
No, me neither. But yeah, I've seen You've Got Mail a number of times.
It's funny because the movie that You've Got Mail is based on is one of the best comedies ever made.
Oh, is it?
The Shop Around the Corner by Ernst Lubitsch with Jimmy Stewart. We're doing an episode on the other podcast, so I'm kind of cross promotion while talking with the donut in my mouth.
Yeah, he's not sharing either, folks.
Here you go. Here's a bite.
I'll see what I can do. You know what I watched? Oh, maybe.
If I don't finish this donut, I promise I'll give half to you.
So a big thing with Evangelion is, so you have all this incredibly over-the-top, robot stuff, of course. And then you have the main character. He has this relationship Dan was describing with the father. It's the show is very much in his own head. And not in the sense of visual, literally him talking to himself moment to moment, what was it in this episode, which he says throughout the whole, I mustn't run away. There's a deliberate decision in choosing, the giant monsters and mechs in, service to a story that's trying to be so human. And obviously we've watched the show. We kind of have an idea as to why that is so far. But I think it's intriguing, if the first 2 episodes, if the story can't carry you, the visuals probably can.
The background painting, we were just like drooling over it the whole time. Like the background visuals, masterful.
Yeah, and when they want to show, foreground buildings, things of that manner, it's almost on a level approaching a kind of, I wouldn't say Ghost in the Shell, which I think was the same year Evangelion started, but maybe just below where Akira was, like 8 years earlier, as far as how the urban landscape is depicted. And, there's a lot of love in drawing, all the angles on the buildings and, all the details and parts on the machine.
And Evangelion is doing it with a lot fewer resources. I think it's interesting you brought up Akira, because I think Akira is a really good counterpoint to Evangelion, because Akira is about constant motion. Everything in the foreground and background is in motion. Yeah, everything in Akira is constantly in motion, which I think Evangelion, you don't like Akira, there is no interiority. Everything is like external events happening to people and people reacting to them. There's no like quiet, thoughtful scene. It's pretty much one giant chase sequence, and that's why it works. But
Tetsuo doesn't really agency past a certain point.
Right. And with Evangelion, you do have, like, it's on that same level of mastery with the backgrounds, but it's much more kind of this eerie, still, and calm. Like, it's really like those cricket noises whenever you see the shots of the power lines.
I love that. That's one of my favorite spots in the shows.
And they realized that, and they played it a few times for you.
Well, I was mentioning how we were watching that one shot where, before the show, not the shot I was talking about earlier for the audience, but another shot that also is like 15 to 20 seconds long, and there's two very large, very imposing pieces of machinery. And the shot is also kind of silhouetted. So you've got the background, you've got basically silhouettes, and then you've got these two pieces of machinery that are really just two relatively small scale, the transparent thing that they print the cells, I'm sorry, that they're just two cells being moved.
Yeah.
You know, so that's sort of how they kind of get around the Akira thing where everything's always moving visually, but being extremely detailed.
Almost like you could have made this show in GIFs, except for the robot battles. Like, you could have just made a few GIFs.
I kept thinking of Leggetti. I kept thinking of Leggetti.
Elijah T.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Leggetti.
I know no other...
Well, I don't know. My French accent's pretty terrible, so maybe we might... But, I've always heard it as Elijah T, but if we have any French listeners out there, please correct.
Yes.
Me, please. Alex, both of us.
Whereas, so if you're not familiar with that, it's
Chris Marker.
It's what is it? It's like a series of photographs. About
all of it is still photographs except for one moving shot of an eye opening. It's about 27 minutes. It's technically a sci-fi film. By a guy named Chris Marker, who made a lot of very weird movies and was very into Second Life in his mid-80s. He's one of the strangest filmmakers who ever lived. Like, he made an entire movie about cat graffiti. Like, he just walked around Paris for a long time filming graffiti that had to do with cats.
Whatever keeps you busy, right? Idle hands.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. He's one of the only people who prefers that his movies aren't watched with subtitles. So, like, most of his movies, if you're watching it in French, he's actually narrating it, which is true, I believe, of Elijah T as well. But if you're watching it in English, which if you're an English language speaker, he's dead now. So but when he was alive, he preferred that you actually listen to the dub, which it isn't that obtrusive, just because, like, the way that he makes movies, it tends to be a lot of narration as counterpoint to visuals, which is true of Elijah T as well.
Okay.
But he has a woman narrate it in the English dubs. I don't know if that's true of the other ones. I haven't watched any of he had, like, specific narrators in each language that he liked to narrate those films. But yeah, it definitely has that. And there's a bit of in Japanese animation, there is a tradition of, like, limited motion animation. The biggest examples I can think of are, like, Belladonna of the Sadness, which is a gorgeous film with a lot of, like, psychedelic looking animation. They finally re-released it on a disc in English a few years ago, so you can actually find it. Barely anything, like, the pictures don't move, but the pictures change every, like, 2-3 seconds or whatever. And that's intentional. The other one I'm thinking of is Midori, which I don't know if you ever saw Midori, but one of the most fucked up Japanese anime ever made. It's also very good, though. It's about this woman who, this young woman joins a traveling circus and gets confronted with some freaky, weird, sexual, violent shit in a manner not completely dissimilar to, like, Bresson's Mouchette, except for the animation. It was all done by one guy, and the stuff doesn't move very much. You're sort of looking at these still images. He's doing a lot of that, like, moving two cells on top of each other to get motion kind of stuff. There's other ones I can't think of right now, but there is a little bit of tradition. Although, actually, Belladonna of the Sadness is after Elijah T. I wouldn't be surprised if Anno was familiar with Elijah T, though, because that's like a pretty famous film. But
I think it, I'm not sure how its, its notoriety was affected by, whatever the movie, 12
Monkeys.
Yeah, I don't know if it was as well known before that as it is, because it didn't really get much of a bump, it doesn't seem like, off of 12 Monkeys.
No, I mean, Marker in terms of, because he's lumped in with the French New Wave guys. So anybody who's like taking a serious look into Godard, Truffaut, Rivet, I'm trying to think of the other ones, Melville, Jean-Pierre Melville, obviously not Herman Melville. That's definitely one of the first, or Agnes Varda, to make it a little bit less of a sausage fest. He's one of the first filmmakers you would encounter from that group.
Okay.
I think if you were trying to track the stuff down on video, and I think also the brevity of the film, because certainly when I was younger, like I was trying to push myself through all the Godard movies. I would still like to someday finish watching all the Godard movies. I probably should not have started that project when I was 15. But Elijah T, it's like oddly, for being such a weird film, it's very accessible.
Yes, it's telling a very strange story, but it's telling it in a way that's accessible. I don't have a better word here. So what else is going on in these episodes? So we've got the ongoing fight that begins not long after Shinji is, told to come to this NERV headquarters, which is this weird military branch making these Evangelions. And the fight is incredibly cool. And something that fascinates me about this show, and I don't know why it's so strange, because it's a perfectly reasonable aspect of the robot, but is the umbilical type power cord it has. Like the fact that the Evangelions need to be plugged in. Like, which, when,
the fact they call it an umbilical cord.
Yes.
Which I can't get into without spoilers. I think as this podcast progresses, we're going to be able to talk more about the actual show without all these tangents. Just because a lot of it, there's a lot of stuff that you just can't talk about without spoiling stuff, because it's they're setting up a lot of things to pay off later.
Well, and plus we've got a lot of tangents because we're kind of just going into the various sundry details here of, what it looks like, what it kind of is. And, but hey,
that's the Anominy brand too.
Hey, we made up for the time we should have been talking about War Games. Did you like War Games?
Yeah, I liked War. I wasn't sure if I was gonna like War Games. There were a few things, like as soon as I saw Matthew Broderick in like what, as far as I can tell, is like one of the most authentic looking early 1980s video game arcades I've ever seen. It's one of the only ones where they don't rebrand half the machines.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Because they must have had the money to, do it the way they wanted to. Yeah, I was hooked. And then I feel like a lot of the stuff, like there are definitely some leaps in logic to make the movie happen, but a lot of the like phone freaking hacking kind of stuff that he's doing isn't really that huge. Like the idea that he could somehow take over the US nuclear silo is pretty far-fetched, but the techniques that he's using to get into the phone system, that scene where they lock him in the room and he uses the cassette deck or the Walkman to break through the code.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is fairly plausible. Like the thing with the cassette deck, like that's totally a thing that people did in the early 1980s.
The stuff with the phone freaking is, people absolutely got into government databases they were not supposed to be in that way. And just like civilian idiots who, bit off more than they could chew.
Right. The thing that probably seemed the most far-fetched at the time, the idea that the computer could learn from itself and then take on a mind of its own.
And then here we are.
Point one war games, yeah.
I mean, because now it's like they don't know how their own algorithms work,
Right.
Yeah, the movie has some really special moments. I figured if you weren't totally into it, you'd be sold as soon as you see him put the phone in the cradle for the internet connection. I
I
saw
mean,
that
the whole
like,
room, like with all the old computer
oh,
shit.
it's like the nerd version of the Ferris Bueller room.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, I
Yeah,
found his character to be a lot more likable than Ferris Bueller. I mean, granted,
I
most characters are, I don't know. I'm not like,
I think Ferris Bueller's Day Off is about Cameron, honestly.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's the one with an arc. Like
Right.
Ferris has an arc. Ferris's arc is to be, this magical character who basically enables Cameron to find himself across the course of the day.
Right.
And, who has the girlfriend that like Cameron really wants, but doesn't make a move on. Not necessarily because it's his friend's girl, but just because he wouldn't anyway, because
Mhm.
that's just who he is at that point in his life.
Right. And in both movies, the big overlap, well, in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, it totally makes sense why the girl's following Ferris Bueller around. Like he's
Oh,
wild,
yeah.
he's crazy, he's got a lot of charisma. Like women as teenagers love, I mean, like me as a teenager, if I met like a larger than life person where they're just going off getting into crazy trouble, but they don't seem like they're a completely malignant psychopath, I'd be pretty into it, like go see the world a little bit. In war games, the one thing that kind of struck me was Ali Sheedy's character, his like girlfriend.
She kind of gets roped into it like Radon Chong in Commando.
Yeah, she's just kind of like there. I don't understand. Like they do finally acknowledge it when she's like, I think they're in the command room and the bomb's about to go off. They think, and she's just like, I told you not to play with that thing, And but up to that point, she's just sort of like, oh yes, I don't know what the guy in the movie's name is. I'm just gonna call him Matthew Broderick.
Yeah.
Right, and she's just like, sure, I'll buy you a plane ticket to Oregon.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll take a plane to Oregon too. My parents don't like, they're like 16. She doesn't know how to hack computers, right? So like if he had hacked into the computer and made the reservation like he makes the reservation to Paris earlier in the movie, it would make more sense. And then she gets there and she really does not seem particularly pissed off that her boyfriend has basically triggered nuclear Armageddon and everyone they know is going to die because he's Matthew Broderick and he looks like he's got a good puppy dog face, right?
I mean, that is one thing that doesn't follow though, because she's not his girlfriend.
Oh wait, she's not his girlfriend. They're just like friends.
No, yeah, they're just. I'm pretty sure
They kiss at the end of the. Or wait, no, because they only ever kiss on the cheek. That was another thing I found kind of strange. They never kiss on the lips.
Yeah,
But they're sort of presumed to have this, and like when his parents are like the dog knocks over the trash can, his parents are screaming at him while he's like breaking into the, and they're like, "We're having a barbecue tonight. You should bring your friend over."
Okay.
And, he looks like he's about to die of embarrassment.
Yeah.
I kind of got the sense like she definitely follows him around like she's his girlfriend. I don't know, but
it kind of smacks of like, oh, fine, we'll put a girl in it, but we're not giving them the fucking arc. She can just be there. So, because the studio wants a girl in there because, want teenage boys to have a cute teenage girl to look at the whole movie.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, though, she is the one who ultimately saves the day.
Does she?
What is it? There's Falcon, the like mad scientist who faked his own death with the help of the government. They go to this island where, and there's that very clever joke on Island of Dr. Moreau where he's flying around that mechanical, what is it called? The dinosaur?
Yeah, the little glider.
Yeah, and
I was about to call it the Island of Dr. Moreau, and then you said that.
Honestly, I think the strongest scene in the movie, my favorite scene in the movie, was definitely just seeing that arcade, because, like, I just want to go to that arcade. But the strongest scene in the movie is definitely when he's showing the weird projection of the dinosaurs, and he's like, "Death is the nature of life. Thankfully, we're all here because you and I will be incinerated. Fuck those bastards who are going to have to survive the blast walking around blind." I was like, holy shit, this is like a movie aimed at
Yeah.
teenagers from like 1983. And she saves the day because ultimately, and you can kind of see it coming a mile away, right? Because like the back door to get into the computer is the name of his dead son.
Right.
And she goes up to him and she's like, would you feel that way if your son was still here?
Yeah, if Joshua was still here.
Joshua, right. And
I forget what the computer was called.
I think the computer was called Joshua.
Oh, okay. I thought that
Or
was
at least whenever they're talking to it,
Yeah.
it's always Joshua. And I mean the ending, the very ending is pretty hokey. The machine figures out that in nuclear war no one wins,
Yeah.
right? And on the other hand, there's no real other way to end the movie that I can think of without just like killing off all the characters and making it having a very large tonal shift.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a morbid movie before that, but it's mostly...
They could have done that tonal shift, honestly. You were saying about, so the scenery takes them in and is showing them projections and, everything's going to die, but, and so you could start there because then the scene right after that is them on the beach on his island. And, Matthew Broderick's like, how far is it? Can we swim? I never learned how to swim. Why didn't I learn how to swim? I thought there'd be time, And it's like Matthew Broderick accepting what's about to happen and, breaking down on the beach outside this guy's house.
That's
I think
true.
that's the strongest scene in the movie, personally. It's the only time where Matthew Broderick really, has to do much than, concerned puppy dog face.
Yeah, I think he's playing like a very subtle Asperger's character in that movie.
I never read it as that, but I did read it as sort of, a more withdrawn, shyer character.
He's kind of like he's somewhat self-involved. There's not a lot of facial expression. There's sort of this okay, maybe I'm stretching a little bit. Yeah, but in terms of tonal shift, it's kind of funny because the other, maybe my favorite nuclear war movie ever, did you ever see Peter Watkins' The War Game? It's like a fake BBC documentary from 1967 that's just like a news report on the aftermath of an actual nuclear war. And my favorite shot in that is just like there's somebody walking around with a bucket pulling wedding rings off these dead women's fingers, and they're all like half incinerated. And like the reason it's such a great movie is because it's the only one that literally cuts no corners about like this is just kind of a horrific thing. And the whole point of the movie when he was making it was to make the most realistic representation of what would actually happen if there was a nuclear war.
Now, is that what The Day After was based on or inspired by, or
possibly? I never saw The Day After.
That was I think it was 1983. It was a TV movie. It was when so talking about prestige TV earlier. It was when sort of prestige TV kind of existed in a prototypical form, in the form of these very
like the big mini series, so like Roots or Holocaust.
Yeah, Roots, exactly. Roots is the best example. Roots, also they, Roots is like an absolute like all-star cast of like black actors at the time.
And O.J. Simpson.
Yeah. who does honestly have good timing in Police Academy. Naked Gun.
Yeah, I mean, the reason everybody was obsessed with that murder case is because there were a lot of people who genuinely liked O.J. Simpson a lot in the mid-1990s. But yeah, no, I doubt that it was based on The War Game just because The War Game was not screened. So basically, he hands this movie into the BBC. They're like, this is too horrific. We refuse to show it on television. the only, like, there were bootleg copies floating around forever. Finally, it got released on there was like a box set of Watkins' work, which if you've never seen any Peter Watkins movie, talking to the listener, Peter Watkins movies, go check it out. He did a lot of great. He did Punishment Park, Privilege. Later on, he did La Commune Paris 1861, which is like this great 6-hour recreation of the Paris Commune using transcripts and actors.
375 minutes.
Yep, it's a lot. But it's split into parts, so you're not watching it all in one sitting.
Oh, that's great. I didn't even know about this movie.
Yeah, and the War Game, though, is only, I think the War Game's only like, I think it's 60 minutes, because it's supposed to be just like a BBC News report, so it would be around an hour, give or take the station ID. Very different movie, but yeah, like if you suddenly cut from War Games, like they get the last number on the ticker, the bombs go out of the silos, and then you just immediately cut to just like people picking up wedding rings and dumping them in a
oh my god
bucket. That would be and then later it would be marketed on DVD as featuring the star of Mousetrap.
And I feel like, didn't I come up with like slapping some ending from some other movie on a totally inappropriate movie earlier? What was that?
Oh, I can't
remember.
I mean, I said something about, like, I think it was when we were talking about Snyder Cuts.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Oh
well.
Snyder Cuts, yeah, that's
Zack Snyder sucks. Next topic.
right.
I mean, his work is not actually without merit, but yeah, it's not really contributing to society in any useful way.
Right, and he created one of the first like if I was gonna like track the proto-fascist cinema that kind of, if you were looking for roots of the present attitudes about politics and whatnot, 300 would be one of the major movies I would point to. And that was like a hot take a few years ago, but now you're literally seeing people showing up to these Proud Boys marches with Sparta masks on.
What's that? MF Doom has just arrived at the Proud Boys rally.
Oh my god, MF Doom!
MF Doom is canceled.
God, MF Doom like had the best one line about, I forget, I think it's in Vaudeville Villain, but just every time I see these people marching, it's like there's that MF Doom song where he's like, a lot of folks like to think that they have violent mob. They really just need to shut the fuck up like Silent Bob. Just beautiful.
So yeah, we had shifted to War Games. Yeah, it doesn't tie into, the thing at the end.
I feel like it does tie into Evangelion, but in ways that we can't talk about because it would give away the ending stuff in Evangelion, but we seem to have filled a decent amount of time without spoiling anything too much yet.
Well, so Evangelion is, if you're familiar with Japanese films, or even haven't necessarily seen any of the Godzilla films, but you're familiar with the background regarding Japanese culture and nuclear anxiety after the war. You have War Games also, or there's a lot of that in this.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
the contrast in the nuclear anxiety is the most telling thing.
Yeah.
Because, like, in Japanese cinema, nuclear anxiety, it's always like, it's almost like an existential metaphor. I guess if we're going back to Akira again, you've got, right, like the reason it's Neo Tokyo is because the first Tokyo was blown up in something that was presumed to be a nuclear explosion. In the original Japanese comics, it's clearly labeled as coming from the United States, even though later on, because we can spoil Akira, I didn't make any promises about that.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of the Japanese stuff, it's coming at it from a much darker perspective, whereas I think a lot of the U.S. nuclear anxiety kind of stuff, including War Games, comes at it from, I don't think a bad perspective. It's just sort of this like kind of childlike perspective of, why would we do this? This is so silly, instead of, here are the reasons why we do this. Here is the awfulness of humanity laid out in front of us, which I think comes out a lot more in Japanese cinema.
Well, because the reality, the human reality of what that is, was literally laid out before them.
Right.
And they don't, personally know that. And so for Americans, it's always been this hypothetical of like, well, if they launch their missiles from this place on the glowing map, and they'll only be here when we fire ours, and we won't be able to shoot down all of them, and that's mutually assured destruction. It's like,
right,
it's
like U.S. nuclear anxiety. It's like a big game of Battleship plus your standard Freudian death anxiety.
Yes.
And then in Japanese cinema, it's a very different thing.
In Japanese cinema, the sheer terror of having seen horrific things done to people's bodies and the bodies of their descendants.
Right. And yeah, that's God, I kind of wanted to write an essay at some point about, I can't remember, I might have written something like this for Writers Without Money, because there's so many atomic bomb things in Japanese cinema, right? Like the pastoral To Die in the Country, when the backdrop falls down and it turns out he's sitting in modern Tokyo, that's a metaphor for the bomb and the destruction of the pastoral society. Even in Ozu, like Ozu, of course, because he is Ozu, it's incredibly subtle. You'll have in the post-war films, like, you'll see somebody riding a bicycle and there will be a Coca-Cola sign distantly in the background, and it's kind of ominous. Not exactly nuclear anxiety, but again, Coca-Cola is a thing that would be inherently associated with U.S. culture in Japan, because most of the Coca-Cola that would have gotten into Japan would have been through the occupation. Paranoia Agent ends with this thing that's basically Hello Kitty effectively acting like a nuclear bomb and destroying Tokyo. Godzilla is all about nuclear. The original Godzilla is like the original Godzilla is a pretty like morbid movie.
There was actually, I don't know, I'll try to find it. Maybe you can throw it in the description. There was a very good article about Godzilla in the New York Times a month or two ago, I think, and about the changes between the actual version and the American version, and how this monster that us looked kind of goofy and not like a very good outfit, like is deliberately designed to resemble the sort of lesions from people.
Right, because anybody who was like not immediately killed by the blast, like and Keiji Nakazawa, who did Barefoot Gen,
looks like
he literally described like anybody who didn't die immediately, their skin's literally melting off their body. The second volume of that book is literally just this kid walking around the wreckage. These people are coming up to him saying, help me, and they're like, skin's literally falling off, and he can't help any of them because he's going to get radiation poisoning, and they're beyond help.
Right.
It's horrific, right? And
our idea of it is, again, that's the difference in the cinema is a bunch of little animations of silos on a glowing map in a dark room. But so, I mean, the thing with the Godzilla, it was a foreign design to us, but it was basically specifically designed to look like the thing that's growing on you after the bomb that's going to kill you. Just in itself, yeah.
And wow, this got dark very quickly.
I mean, it's about Evangelion. It's gonna go again.
True, this is gonna get. We meet Pen the Penguin.
What's that?
Pen the Penguin.
Yes, Pen the Penguin.
The one character who we never find out why he's there. There's no thematic purpose why he's there. Nobody would want the show without him, though. Pen is. I'm touching my heart right now. My heart. We all want a Pen. That's really the reason Pen is in the show.
Just beer swilling penguin who likes to take a schwitz.
Probably my favorite, like, weird animal character in anime. Like, and they don't develop him at all. He doesn't need to be developed. He's just
he's just there.
He's just there, and he's doing his thing. And you know what? It's like aspirational.
I'll tell you what. You know what? When they start sagging into those like kitchen scenes with Shinji, who's like one of the nerve agents takes charge of him since he's a minor, and so he's living with her. And those scenes, like, they'll get like kind of goofy, and it's her being slovenly is sort of the recurring bit there. But it'll still be tense from what's going on around it. I'll tell you, man, when that penguin walks in, cuts the tension like a knife through butter.
And there's also a very clever dick joke, which I did not fully appreciate until this viewing.
Yes, the toothpick joke.
Shinji goes to take a shower. He walks out because the penguin is in there. He's completely naked. Katsuragi sees him naked. He's incredibly embarrassed because he's kind of probably... Any like straight man would probably at that age have a massive crush on her.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I would for sure. Even now, because I don't know what's good for me, I probably would have a crush on that woman if I met her for real. But
she likes beer and she doesn't like picking up after herself. Sounds like the perfect person for me.
Yeah, it's like, she's gonna have some fun, but she's smart and she can take charge of large robots. I don't know if that's really I haven't put that in my internet dating profile yet. Maybe that's the missing ingredient. But he's standing there. There's a large beer can, or the beer can's a normal size, but because of perspective, it looks pretty enormous, and it's covering his dick. And he takes away the beer can, and the thing in front of the beer can is this smaller jar. And, that's supposed to be like he's emasculated. I did not realize the label on the jar until now. It says toothpicks on it.
I gotta find a version of this that has that feature, because I love sign translations.
Yeah, it seems like this one it's a lot better, because the other ones I've had, and I don't understand why they make DVDs like this, but, on a lot of anime DVDs, you're choosing between the dialogue translation or the sign translation. They're on separate tracks for whatever reason.
What I remember is when they remastered Akira like 20 years ago and released it, and it had
they had the guy from Power Rangers doing the dub.
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm not familiar.
I just remember I probably read it in Wizard Magazine around when it came out, because I was like a hardcore Wizard Magazine reader back then.
Okay. But they, in that version, there was an option to enable sign translations, but then what would happen is an icon would show up on the screen, and you'd press a button, and it would pause and superimpose, like, this says that, and it was just, it sucks.
I mean, if you can't read quickly enough, I guess that's like, but at the same time, if you just had subs that had both of them, and there are definitely parts in Evangelion later on where you'll have, and this is kind of a weird, you don't see this in a lot of things that get exported for obvious reasons, because like, usually things you want to export to other countries, you want it to have as little dialogue as humanly possible. That's why those Marvel movies don't usually have much dialogue in them, because like half the audience they're selling them to is in China. But yeah, no, there's like definitely scenes where you'll have a conversation going on and there's talk on the radio. There's like two pretty quickly running subtitle tracks on the top and bottom of the screen. And also with Evangelion, an issue that I do, and this is like an issue with a lot of, I can count on one hand the number of anime where I actually like the dubs, but the dub of Evangelion, they never redid it. It's just whoever was in the Funimation office when they first released it. It's terrible.
I have a very hard time like Akira. I can't watch without the dub from 1999. Like, so, like, it's just so weird to me because that was the version, like, I grew up with. But then, like, Dragon Ball, I can watch either one because I watch so much, like there's a channel, it was like French TV or something, and for whatever reason, it was in the Time Warner cable package my family had, and it was like channel, 372 or whatever, mixed in with all the other foreign language channels you subscribe to. And they were showing Dragon Ball from, like, just reruns at that point, but Dragon Ball from, 3 seasons ahead of where they were on Cartoon Network. And that was subtitled, so.
Sometimes you would get those weird... I remember when I would visit my grandparents in Long Island, they had a pretty good cable package. And, like, obviously you get the local channels that you don't get in a lot of places, but then you get some of these ones where it must have been the package they chose. And, like, I've never bought a cable package, so I don't know what because I know you can't do it a la carte. I just kind of presume there's, like, 2 or 3 packages usually, and you just grab one. And it's certainly not something my grandparents ever had any interest in, but you would get it wasn't the Country Living, it was like the Farm and Country channel.
Okay.
And it's literally, and I was hooked. I was like, every time I went there, I would just, because it was like a thing that didn't exist anywhere else on TV. I've never found anyone else who saw this station. I swear to God, my sister will back me up on this, that it exists. It's just lo-fi footage of county fairs and, like, horse shows.
There must be a lot of big hogs there.
Yeah, it's not even like, it's not like a documentary about them. It's literally just sort of you're following this guy with a camera around a fucking, like, county fair.
And here's the 4th biggest hog in Iowa.
Right. Like, that's
biggest hog in Iowa.
Not even like sometimes they just be walking past, like, fucking concession stands, and then when they go to the commercials, and I don't know why anyone would need this in Long Island, they're advertising mange cream. I've never seen an advertisement for mange cream on any other television station. They're advertising stuff you would get at a farm supply store, and granted, there are people who do buy those things. There is a market. I don't think they're mostly in Freeport, Long Island.
But that might be why. I mean, there are in Long Island, though, so that might be why you could get that cable package in, nearby Freeport.
It was just so weird, and I've never found it again. I did finally find, there was another TV show that I remembered that I thought I was the only person who remembered, and somebody uploaded the entire thing to YouTube, called Miss Charity's Diner.
Okay.
So when I first got to college, I was living in this apartment with this guy from, I think he was from Peru. He was like a hoarder. That's a whole other story. I had this TV. It had a built-in DVD player. I did not have cable, so I could get in 3 channels, sort of, in black and white, very fuzzy, but I could get it in. I could get in, like, whatever channel played Smallville. WB. There was, like, one other channel. I can't remember what it was the Spanish language game show channel.
Okay.
Which is not the actual name of it, but whatever the station was in
that
Manhattan that played the Spanish language game shows all the time. And around 11 p.m. at night, it would switch over to this children's show called Miss Charity's Diner. And all the puppets had these giant bags under their eyes. So, like, the people you'd expect to be working at a Denny's, but they're puppets. And she runs this diner, and these, like, little kids come in and tell her their problems. And it was just the most freaky, it's like a Christian thing. And again, my sister came to visit. I showed her this so that somebody else remembered it existed. I looked and looked on the internet for it, because I was just like, this is so freaky. Couldn't find anything on it, but finally somebody uploaded all of it. So it exists. It's there. I'm not going crazy. Why show it at 11 p.m.? Why show a children's show at 11 p.m.? It's in English, and they're showing it on the Spanish language channel. There were just so many things about that didn't make any sense.
Oh, man. And there would be channels that were like, they would switch languages. Like it'd be like all the languages got a block, every couple of hours they're into a different language.
And I guess, like, if you're going to do that anywhere, New York City's the place to do it. It just was not something I was used to on TV. I mean, do you have any memories like that of just, like, stuff where it's like, I saw this on TV, nobody else seems to remember this existing?
Yeah, it's usually... I find more often I'll remember, like, weird ads. And, like, the memory's so vague, but there's some, like, I would watch, when I was, like, 10 or 11 or something, I would stay up until, like, 1 in the morning to watch Extreme Championship Wrestling, that was the one where they were, fucking breaking light bulbs over each other's heads, strangling each other with, barbed wire. And, man, there were some weird commercials during that block. I mean, for starters, like, so many sex line commercials. So very many. Yeah, shows like, what's a show? I mean, there have been ones that I've struggled to pin down for a while. There were about 2 or 3 years where I could not remember enough details about Salute Your Shorts to remember what the show was or what it was called. And then I came across it, and I saw the shorts up on the flagpole. I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember that.
Oh, wait, okay, I remember. It wasn't called the Country Living, it was called the Rural Living Channel. That was the name of it. It was the Rural Living Channel. And then I used to listen to a lot of radio in the middle of the night. Like, when I was a kid, like, my parents would let me put on the radio to go to sleep to, and I would just not go to sleep and just listen to the oldies radio station till, like, whenever I actually fell asleep. And they would have these ads for, like, an under-18 nightclub in Albany, New York. And the thing I remember, and we used to joke about this in school, so it's like there were other people did hear this, but when I talk about it now, I don't know anybody else who still remembers it. And it was called Secrets, and every ad would end with Secrets, now with a water cannon. And like, what's the water cannon for? What's it? Why do you have an under-18 nightclub? What is any of this? And, I never went out there because I wasn't like, I'm not into night clubbing now. I was certainly not into night clubbing when I was 10 years old. What is it? But yeah, no, that was like a joke at the lunch show, like, now with a water cannon. It's like as a thing to add to the end of stuff.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah, under 18 nightclub, I guess I get the idea. It just sounds wrong initially. And hopefully we didn't misname anyone who did anything during the Nickelodeon segment of the show, lest we get... ironically, I don't think you can get canceled for that. So I think we're okay, actually.
Yeah, if anybody out there went to Secrets or saw the water cannon, like, you could make 2020 worth it if you call me and tell me what the hell was going on there. Like...
We'll put you on the show. You can have.
We will put you on the show. I will.
You got all the perfect lives people together. The
yeah,
man
get all the perfect lives now with a water cannon. Speaking of which, I do actually have to contact. There's some more people we were supposed to interview that I need to contact.
Oh, okay.
The guy who plays the piano during it. He's. I got to contact his caretaker, and hopefully we can get an interview with him over the phone.
Okay. Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, because he's not doing so hot, but he is a very important part of that story that we were not able to get into the group call.
Right. Yeah, I know. I mean, you'd been talking it up, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. You got a bunch of people. I open up that Zoom call. It's like the Brady Bunch intro, man.
Yeah, we got a lot of people for that. As soon as that group email started,
that was great.
And I found out actually a really cool thing that was not mentioned during the pod. And I mean, why would it have been mentioned? Mimi Johnson, the kind of like feisty woman, older woman that we were talking to, she was John Cage's agent for like 30 years.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like bizarre to me, right? Because like he's sort of, and when there's a part in Perfect Lives where Robert Ashley is talking about the quote unquote oldsters, and he's talking about this like woman who ran the kitchen performance space in John Cage.
Okay.
Like, to him, because he just studied with him, so to him it's just sort of, I mean, it's not just sort of like John Cage was a pretty major figure. John Cage, to those who are unfamiliar, John Cage is to American experimental music, kind of what like Charlie Chaplin was to film comedy. Like he's this major early figure, and everything afterwards is sort of just revolving around ideas that he had to a large extent.
He's best known. I think you mentioned it earlier. He's best known for 433, which
Right.
is just 4.5 minutes of silence. Which I'm one of those guys who walks into the Museum of Modern Art and spends most of my time pissed off. So. So like, which not, and you're a big part of this actually, is which not that I don't have any tastes for abstract art. Increasingly, I do, but I mean, there's one. It's like a white canvas. Like that's the bit, and I say a bit because they're doing a bit. Like,
oh yeah, they're totally doing a bit. I think that the 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence thing, so there's a great book of essays that Cage wrote that's called Silence, and he goes into what the actual intentions of the piece were, and it's not that the audience is sitting there in silence, it's that, so he had this very formative experience very early in his music career where he walked into his first soundproofed room, right, to record something, and there's nothing going on, and he still hears this humming, and he talks to the engineer, and he's like, "What's the humming?" And he said, "That's your nervous system." And he realizes there is no such thing as silence. Silence is this abstract construct. So the idea with 4 minutes and 33 seconds is that you're basically forced to hear the audience or to just sort of hear.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be silence. It's supposed to be just the ambience.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like proving the impossibility of silence. And then there's also, so I think like for people getting into John Cage, the record to look for, and I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube and streaming services and stuff. It's called Indeterminacy, and it's just him telling these like 1 minute long stories over very bizarre piano music about collecting mushrooms and leaving his windows open. And it's great. It's like he's a really entertaining. He's got this like very distinctive voice, like very high pitched and nasal. Well worth a look. And then some of the other stuff, because he would like put nails into a piano to see what kind of sounds it would get, because he was trying to, he didn't believe in notes. He was like kind of skeptical of the Western scales. So there's a lot of writing in that book about microtones, and he would try to get this. He would call what he called prepared pianos. He would just put a bunch of junk into the piano to see what kind of noises he could get out of it, right? And later in his life, he got there's some like gorgeous pieces that he managed to do with like those with modified violins. He even did some like somewhat traditional like string quartet type pieces. He made a lot of music. I think the easiest piece to explain though is definitely 4 minutes and 33 seconds, but it's not pop music. You're not going to be, it doesn't have a beat. You can't dance to it, but it's definitely, it's worth a look or a listen. I think a lot of it.
I mean, I think once it's described.
Yeah, the 4 minutes and 33 seconds, it's very easy to pitch. The other stuff, I don't think, I'm not conveying the full effect by describing it, but yeah, there's a lot there. Yeah. But that was a fun fact that one of our later guests informed me of, and
Fascinating.
so
Now,
I'm two Kevin Bacons from John Cage.
That's it, man. I mean, hey, we were talking about Moonstruck before. I knew Danny Aiello, so.
yeah. It's all about that like Boswell factor, right?
But also, I mean, not that that's how my family knew him, but also like I lived on the Upper East Side, on the Upper West Side at points. Like these are places where a lot of extremely famous people live. Like I think I lived like about 10 blocks from that apartment manor where John Lennon got shot.
Not the Chelsea Hotel. Give me a second. I can think of it.
Green something.
Yeah, the green. Anyway, but yeah, you were living close to.
Yeah, so I think that's why because just like living in New York City, it's like very weird like that. You'll meet people who like worked with so and so. Shitty actor. He was better at what he did with me. Like, and like so that is different. So it's funny that from sort of your angle from it, that you manage to weave these webs of
Yeah, I mean,
these contacts.
and it turns out I was talking to my older sister, and she actually interviewed his choreographer 30 years ago.
Wow.
John Cage's choreographer, a guy named Merce Cunningham, for like 15 minutes because she was writing for her friend's zine. She didn't mention that it had a circulation of 15 people. And he was like, all right, I'll give her 15 minutes. And she has a tape somewhere of this interview with Merce Cunningham. She also prank called Ken Casey once. I don't know if I ever told you that story.
No.
Somehow, I don't know how she did that. I mean, she hung out with Ed Sanders for an afternoon, who like dated one of the people responsible for the Manson family murders and was also a member of the Fugs. And he lives in upstate New York. He's like, and somehow she ended up hanging out with him for an afternoon when she was a teenager. And I don't think that's how she got Ken Casey's phone number, but I can't imagine how else she would have gotten Ken Casey's phone number. I'd have to ask her. But anyway, she prank called Ken Casey. It was New Year's. She's with my cousin. They're sitting around my grandmother's house, the one with all the like sad clown paintings on the walls. And it's like half an hour to midnight, and they're like, oh, okay, and they're like psyching themselves up, like, I'm gonna prank call Ken Casey. And they get his assistant.
Just to be clear, just because the audio is not totally there, you're talking about the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Correct. And so they get his assistant, and she's like, oh, this is Carrie. And the assistant goes to or maybe no, I think she called, she's coming on the other show. I should probably ask her for the actual detail, because she told me this when I was really young. But the story that I remember is no, she called Collect. That's what it was, because why would his assistant be working on New Year's? She called Collect. She was like, it's Carrie. The operator talks to Ken Casey and is like, oh yeah, Carrie, I've known Carrie for years. Yeah. He gets on the phone and he's like, who the fuck is this? And they talk for maybe like 8 or 10 minutes or something. And, she probably, that would have been pretty exciting.
Well, I mean, what'd she do? Did she like interview or do the is your refrigerator running bit?
I'll have to ask her when she comes on the show. I mean, I managed to call, there was a WFMU call-in show, and they had the, not Gene Colan, the other one, the book's right in front of me over here. The guy who drew most of Howard the Duck, and I managed to get through on the air and ask him about Howard the Duck, and that was beautiful, because I am the world's biggest Howard the Duck fan. But I don't remember that might be in the WFMU archives. It might be, because they seem to keep record. They keep recordings of a lot of their programs. But I was also really drunk, so they cut me off before my question finished. But he did manage to hear the words Howard the Duck, and then talked about Howard the Duck for a few minutes.
Okay. Yeah, and if you, by the way, if you listen to a radio show you really like or whatever, and your station does happen to have keep recordings, grab them.
Yeah,
because they don't always stay up, and you're fortunate that they even do keep recordings.
Yeah, some of them keep fairly extensive archives, but a lot of them, it's just a lot of data to hold, because you're talking about like sometimes 2 to 3 hours a day or a week.
A lot of this shit's getting the 1960s Doctor Who treatment.
Right. Yeah, like there's a lot of episodes of no, it wasn't WFMU, it was WBAI, I'm pretty sure. Because I used to love that was like one of the biggest thrills of Occupy Wall Street was when I got to go on WBAI, because I was like that they were my go-to in the middle of the night, and they had this guy Tom. Shit, my friend Barrett would remember this because we kind of bonded over the fact we were the only two people seemingly in New York that actually listened to this guy's radio show. It was called Weaponry. It was on at like 2 a.m. on Tuesdays, I think, on WBAI. So that's sort of like, extreme filter, extreme filter, extreme filter. All that's left is me and Barrett. And it was this guy who was very qualified expert in the history of weaponry, would pick a topic that he was going to talk about. It was a one-man talk show. But every time I heard him, like there was one episode where somehow his glasses broke, so he was just complaining he couldn't read the index cards, but he had to fill an hour. So it's like Tim and Eric shit. He's just like, well, I was going to tell you about World War II Panzer tanks. Well, my glasses broke, and my landlord is not helping me. And my ex, she left a few decades ago, not helping me. And I just, I wish I could read you guys these index cards, but I can't read the fucking index. Or you didn't say, he didn't say fucking, but you can imagine, like, I was hooked. Like that was like fucking catnip at that point in my life.
It makes me think there are not enough Orson Welles commercial outtakes in the world. We truly, there could have been no limit on this. It's like how the guy who does Zap Brannigan's voice doing Trump quotes and Zap Brannigan.
Oh yeah, Billy West.
Yeah, it's like how that never got old. Like it all just worked so well, but parody now is one of those things that, like, unless you literally don't know what it is, like, you can't fail at it because it's just laid bare before us.
Oh yeah, and I think like this is a great time to do parody because you can actually look up the source material.
Yes, and did you? This would be a whole nother tangent. And like 40 minutes ago, I was thinking we were getting kind of punchy, but
oh yeah, I mean, we've been recording for a while, so like if we can wind down towards a sign off. I think we've bared our souls to the public. We exposed something to the public.
Yeah. And so what was the last topic we were on right there?
Lost media, or like media that we don't.
Yeah, see, this is what I'm talking about.
Nuclear war, the horrors of nuclear war. That was another greatest hit.
Just recently, after the thing about how he'd go to Tim and Eric.
Oh,
this is top tier radio, folks. Donate to our Patreon.
Yeah, donate to. If you enjoy this podcast, smash that like button
and hit subscribe.
Hit subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of our other thrilling 3-hour videos. Although this is fun because, like, I used to, when I was a teenager, I was doing 2 hours a week. So this is just sort of.
Yeah. But yeah, so War Games, yeah, we hit all the marks on that. Evangelion, we'll get more into it. It's a lot more of a character study than it appears on the surface, but we're unable to really get into that now. So tangents, and more
tangents, and that's on brand. So I guess, do you have any final words about Evangelion, War Games?
Evangelion, I'm looking forward to the ride because the first 2 episodes are very enjoyable. I remember it took me a while the first time I watched it. It would be like an episode every maybe 2 or 3 days. There was just something about it that was that had the gears turning at the time, and was kind of slowing me down. But this time, this should be fun, and I'm hoping to get a better grasp of this overall because it gets dense.
It does get very dense, and I think, we're going to have a lot more Evangelion-centric conversation, hopefully, in the future.
And
this hasn't been fun. But...
Yeah. and we're looking to hopefully pair it with something thematically appropriate. Each time, maybe yes, maybe no. I hear you're due to watch RoboCop, so that'll...
I was going to watch RoboCop. There's probably some way we can tie the two things together.
I think... Oh, yeah, but Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Yeah, that's one I should rewatch.
Yeah. All right, so
Cool.
if Buddy Horror thing, we're going to be talking about it.
Yep, and I guess this is our first sign-off, so this has been Dan.
And I'm Alex.
And this has been Anominy. What has this been?
Questionable body horror.
Yeah, questionable body horror. If you like it, smash that like button. Just like smash it.
Yeah, get smashed. There's not much to do in quarantine but smash. So
just get smashed.
Yeah. Get smashed. Do smashing. Smash Jack Nicholson on the side of the head like Shelley Duvall with that baseball bat.
Get loose and juiced, a little slice of life. Beastie Boys.
I don't know.
Let it all corners of the land. I get up on the stage and put the mic in my hand. I'm not playing around. Take care.
That'll be all. Have a good night, folks.